he's implying that there's more to the geography of the world than what we're told. And I don't know, I don't myself have a complete theory about what the geography of the world is, but this is something that I subscribe to at this point. I would say most definitely. I think that there's territory in the world that we don't know about, and it could be everything from what has become quite popular now, the idea of Antarctica is really an ice wall. The territory we see on our map is really something that occupies a flat surface, not a ball, and that there's other stuff beyond the ice wall that we don't even know about. So that's the modern and popular flat Earth theory. That is one example of how you could think about this.
Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's been a long time. If I start coughing and hacking, just try to ignore that. So, yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks. My son was sick, then my daughter was sick, then I was sick, then my son was sick. Anyways, it just kept on going. So sorry about that. I had some legal issues that I still have to deal with. So that's been taking a bit of my time and my worries. And I'm going on a trip. My wife set us up a vacation, 3 days in Naples, Florida. So I'll be in Naples, Florida for a couple days. And then things will hopefully get back to normal after everything's all said and done. Well, regular. I wouldn't say normal. So I hope everybody's doing well. This is my first video of the month. I think I may have only done like 1 or 2 videos last month. But anyways, some of the things that I've been going and researching across kind of led me back to Tracy Twyman, which is interesting. Because I've been looking at, of course, the whole thing that I've been looking at through Flat Earth. Or just the globe earth lie, and then going as far back as Pythagoras and Heraclitus and how they relate to it, as far as there's a video for it. You can go ahead and watch that one. Well, excuse me. I was looking into the cult origins of NASA. Which gets back to, people like Jack Parsons, Wernher von Braun, but even before that, that's kind of been an inspiration, I guess, for NASA and JPL and all that being set up is there's people like, of course, Pythagoras, Isaac Newton, and John Dee, which has a lot to do with the globe earth model. But within Jack Parsons, you got people like Aleister Crowley, Wilfred Talbot Smith, L. Ron Hubbard, Trofim Lysenko, Walt Disney. There's a whole bunch that piecing together. Anyways, all of this actually ties back into Ultra Plus. And Tracy Twyman does an interview with someone, and I'm just gonna play back that almost the entire video. It's about 2 hours long, and she talks about flat Earth. She's very, as you can see, that there's the quote of the day. That's her. Anyways, hi Dave Hinkle, how's it going? Okay, so I gotta do my usual thing. Let's see. All right, here we go. I work with full disclosure and transparency, which is why I've wanted donations via cryptocurrency, since you can always see how much I receive via the address without me having to disclose it. However, since I've received $0 via cryptocurrencies, I've had it up over a 20-month period. I gotta edit that. I decided to add a PayPal address. This is my PayPal address. You may donate there or Google Super Chat, whatever. this is the blockchain that you can look at. It's still 0, 20 months. I wonder if I can make it to 100 months with 0 donations. These transactions are me taking money out of my Patreon when I closed it and gave it to Susie Dawson when she needed it, and Vertcoin 0. So first video of the month, I want to disclose how much money I've received. In February, I got $2 Australian from Grant Jarvis. Thank you, Grant Jarvis. And you can see all the donations I've had from Super Chats in the past, and I thank everyone for those. And there's a background I need. Hopefully that works. Hold on, give me a second. I just want to make sure. Oh shoot, it won't matter, huh? Okay, there we go. That's kind of, I don't know why that kind of, oh no, shit. Why did it do that? Anyways, thank you for the donations I received from this one person for a long time. Helps keep me going. And anyways, that's the thank yous and the amounts received. Now what I'm gonna go over now, I thought I fixed all that. All right, so Tracy Twyman, links in the description box. This is from the Occulture podcast. I don't know if it's from them. I think so. I mean, it's in the title, so it's worth listening to. There's links again in the description box for the video that I have. You can go here to start from where I'm starting, and you can go here to actually listen to the part where the quote of the day is occurring. Because I am kind of sick and stuff still, I'm just recovering. I won't interject very much. I'm just going to play back the entire thing, because all of it kind of relates in many ways, and I may stop at a couple points early on, especially, and then I'm just going to kind of leave it so everyone can listen all the way through it. And so, all right, enjoy, and you'll hear from me whenever I break the fourth wall.
A big shout out to our guest, Tracy Twyman, the lady thinking outside the gift box. Well, no, that's not entirely accurate. With Tracy, there is no box. And if you're familiar with her work, if you've read any of her books or blogs or heard her on other podcasts, you know what you're in for. If you're unfamiliar with Tracy, Jesus, tap dance and Christ, are you in for a sweet, sweet audio treat? Well, sort of. While the material presented here is high-grade sonic kush, we did have some audio issues here, and I am so very sorry for it. Tracy was on a cell phone and the connection was a bit spotty. She sounds a little hollow from time to time, which, if I think about it, is sort of appropriate considering some aspects of the conversation. Of course, I did my best to clean this up and balance it out, and it turned out okay. If you stick with it, though, trust me, this one gets good. So let's crank the volume on this one up to 58 and cast this pod off plus ultra style deep into the hidden hyperspace kingdom of the elite, where LARPs are front page news, Mithras is the mayor, and a local sex shop sells sun-drenched diamond dildos. Enjoy. Tracy Twyman, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem, no problem. You know, I'd like to start off on a personal note, and if I have a connection to somebody that they're unaware of, I'd like to brief them on that. So just grant me a moment here. I just want to tell you a quick story. About 8 or 10 years ago, I started writing a novel that actually was turned into a series of novels, and I had kind of sketched out 9 books in this series of novels, and I'm still working through it, but I'm not going to tell you what the plot is because it's kind of irrelevant, but the title that I gave to the entire series, which I know that you're familiar with, was actually Plus Ultra.
Oh, wow.
And I was not aware of your work back then. I was not even aware of what the phrase was connected to. I had done some basic searching on Latin phrases, and that was one of the ones that when I was searching through like a Latin phrase dictionary that stuck out to me. I liked what it meant. It was pertinent to what I was writing about in the series of novels. And then here I am now, doing this podcast. I've been introduced to your work through this genre of podcasts, and lo and behold, you have an entire history with that phrase that I was completely unaware of. It's part of your membership section now, or it's the name of your patron section, I guess, on your website. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's sort of it's a synchronicity that those kinds of things have been popping up a lot for me in the last couple of years, especially since I've been doing this podcast. So I do want to talk about Plus Ultra. For those of us that are unaware of what that means, maybe take us through what that means and how it relates back to what we'll be talking about today.
Well, it was a phrase that was affiliated with the Royal House of Spain, and they had put it on their coins after they started colonizing the New World, and they were, mining gold and silver in tremendous amounts. And they were really proud of their accomplishments, so that's why they put this phrase and the logo that they did. They made it into their coat of arms and put it on their coins and stuff. It had the 2 pillars of Hercules represented as actual pillars, like of a building. 2 pillars, and then there was a banner on each one. One said plus and the other said ultra, and the phrase means there is more beyond. So they were saying there's more to our empire beyond the pillars of Hercules, and there's more stuff to be discovered. There's more land, there's more wealth and gold and silver and other wonderful things beyond the pillars of Hercules. They were just boasting about their accomplishments and the scope of their empire. And that phrase and that symbol is thought by some to be part of the evolution and the influence on the dollar sign that we have, the S with the line through it. Because these Spanish coins with the symbol on it were the first coins called dollars in the American colonies. They were actually reals. They were Spanish reals, but people called them dollars, and sometimes they called them pillar dollars because they had the pillars on them. So anyway, it's a phrase that is associated with a symbol that's part of the evolution of our money, the history of the money that we use here in the United States. And it's also, and in fact, there's dollars all over the place, and I think they all use the same dollar sign. So it's part of all that heritage, the heritage of the dollar as it's used today, even the Australian dollar and all the other ones. But the other thing is, it has a broader application because it is also sort of a symbol of everything that's kind of beyond the scope of normality. So yes, it represents the old world from its perspective, looking at the bright future beyond the pillars of Hercules, the bright future of things that have not been explored yet. So it's been used in other contexts since then as a way of representing even going beyond into another dimension. And that's kind of what I've been focusing on in the last few years when I write about it. I'm usually talking about it in that aspect. And I think that a good representation of how that interpretation of it has been around since the beginning almost is when it was used in one of the book plates, or no, one of the I don't know if it was the frontispiece, but it was one of the main illustrations in Novus Organum, the book by Francis Bacon, and it had a ship going through the 2 pillars of Hercules. And in that specific context, it represented going into unknown, not only the new world geographically, but scientifically, new information. So that's the way I'm using it, and that's the way several other modern groups apparently have been using it, is just as a symbol of going off into the unknown, not only scientifically, geographically, but even in what I was saying in terms of physics and the dimensions that we're in. It's the idea of going and seeing something from a higher, broader perspective. And in fact, one of the things I've been explaining to people lately in my writing and on some of the videos that I've put out is you can see this symbol or this concept on the Masonic tracing boards and other Masonic symbols that include the pillars, especially when they have the 3 pillars. Sometimes they have 2, but sometimes you can see the 3rd one there also. And it's usually presented as being kind of off to the left. And you can tell it looks like you wouldn't see the other pillar unless you were looking at it from the right angle. If you were looking at it straight on, you would only see 2 pillars. But if you look at it from another angle, then you can see the 3rd one in the background. And they'll often have a stairway going past that pillar, kind of off up into the sky, or a long twisty road kind of, again, peeling up into the sky, going up. So, and then at the end of that road or that ladder or that staircase, there'll be an opening in the sky. So it's showing you going through the pillars and going beyond. And that third pillar is like the third pole. And I'm literally talking about, you can think of it geographically. They actually have the directions of the compass written on the edge of this Masonic tracing board I'm thinking of, where they have the three pillars. And so they showed the sky, that the direction that's associated with the side of the picture, where the sky is. It's like at the bottom you have the ground, at the top of the picture is the sky, and then you've got left and right. Well, the sky is the north, according to the compass that they have on this Masonic symbol tracing board. So they're showing you a different way of thinking about dimensions and perspective, that going north could actually be going up. And I don't want to, I guess maybe we need to have a little bit more explanation before I launch too deeply into this, but basically we're literally talking about the idea that you could go travel to the North Pole and then travel beyond it and be going up, and not just, to the, around the ball to the other side, but that, you can actually, by going forward, start going up because you're traveling through the pillars to another dimension. I guess that's just one way of explaining the idea that I see embedded in Plus Ultra.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there for sure. And you mentioned the third pole, and I think that's a good transition, maybe perhaps, into the fourth pole, which I call the pole on 4chan.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there real quick and look at the Masonic tracing board that she was talking about. And something that I realized that's pretty interesting is when we look through these, you got the NESW, which we would think it stands for North, East, Southwest. Typically, North would kind of be at the top, but North has been on the left side and South on the right. And so just to give you kind of an illustration of what she's talking about, the two pillars, and that there being a third pillar. And you're going to listen further on, they're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things that kind of tie in. And you're going to see the representation of the sun, the moon, and then she's going to talk about diamonds and the prism, sorry. And you'll kind of understand a little bit more. And I think that's kind of, that's stuff I didn't know about before. And it's just good stuff. And when she talks about Plus Ultra or Ultra Plus, I get those two mixed up. It doesn't matter really. She talks about with Isaac Cappy, with her brief interaction with him, and I may have to play back that podcast as well. But it's kind of hard to find a lot of Tracy Twyman material these days. So much of it's gone, unfortunately. But the ones that I have found, like when Isaac Cappy, and I'm going to have to review the entire Isaac Cappy thing sometime, but somehow she knew the email or something that he was directing people to email for information that he can use to get the word out. It was something with Plus Ultra. And then Plus Ultra, of course, there's going to be ties into a whole bunch of things, especially Walt Disney, and then all that stuff is going to be tied into NASA as well. Not in this video. I put the NASA in parentheses because that's stuff I was looking into. Then I found this stuff from Tracy Twyman, and it's going to all connect further, and it's just going to be pretty interesting. Let's just say that. Anyways, I'm just going to tile through a couple of more of these Masonic tracing boards that she was talking about. And anyways, I'm going to go ahead and continue. Sorry for that interjection.
And what's going on there right now. So,
yeah.
yeah. So Plus Ultra does connect to this insider named QAnon, who's been dropping what they call breadcrumbs on 4chan for the last couple of months. And then Plus Ultra connects to that. It also connects to Donald Trump. This connection to me is pretty fascinating. So I was wondering if you don't mind, let's just explain what QAnon is, what's been going on there, and how it relates to Trump and Plus Ultra.
All right. Well, QAnon is a person claiming to be a White House insider and really a confidant of Donald Trump himself specifically. He implies that there's several conspiracies going on and that Trump only has a few people he can talk to that are on his side. And he claims that there's a military coup afoot that he's presenting as a good thing. That he and his friends, close to Donald Trump, are actually trying to get the New World Order and arrest all the bad guys and take their money. And it's implied that it's related to the Pizzagate phenomenon, that all the people that need to be arrested have also been molesting children, and they're all part of this cabal that's controlling the world by controlling politicians through blackmail, by setting them up with child prostitutes and then videotaping it. That part, I know that is basically what runs the world. That is true. That's how politicians are controlled. And so that I have no doubt that's going on. So that's what he's saying, basically, that what it sounds like, he's trying to get somebody in the world to have some understanding that this is what's going on, so that there will be someone on his side. If you were to take it literally and actually believe him, that they're trying to get someone on their side to understand what's going on, when it will appear to everybody else that there's just this horrible military coup happening and we're going into martial law and this Nazi Donald Trump has taken over, and this is the World War III, this is the end, this is everything our parents warned us about, and this worst chapter in history happening right now. But this guy is trying to scream out and say, no, it's not a bad thing. The New World Order is actually the bad thing, and we're trying to put an end to it. So if you were to take it literally and seriously, then that's what he's saying. That's the message he's trying to convey. Now, of course, I don't know how much experience your listeners have with 4chan, and me, I only really know I've been on the X boards and I've been on the Paul board, which is the politically incorrect board. I don't lurk on there other than that, and I don't always go there either. It's not something I do every day. It's only when I hear that something juicy is being talked about usually on the POL, the poll, because lately, over the last year or two, that's been a place where information actually is dropped from insiders. And it's probably just because there's an audience there. There's a sympathetic audience, and you can do it anonymously. And the people on, I don't know about the rest of 4chan, but I know that certainly on Paul, they have a culture, a community of what they call themselves autists, right? So it's kind of this joke that they're all somehow on the autistic spectrum. They have social problems. They're not very good at socializing, but they stay at home on their computers doing research and geeking out on certain subjects. And so the idea is that if you were an insider with a whistle to blow and you wanted to get some information out, you could do it on 4chan and specifically on Paul, because you could do it anonymously, and then people will take the breadcrumbs that you drop and find out if there's something to it or not. And actually I think this is not a bad strategy, because people can do what is happening to QAnon, which is he's getting attacked every thread that he posts something new. He gets attacked for what they call LARPing, which means, live action role playing. Like, basically they're just saying that you're a liar and you're joking, you're trolling us. And so anyone who takes Q seriously gets attacked by that also. But if you could just somehow filter out all that, in the midst of that, there are people who are actually taking the information and seeing if it's, if it leads to anything, if it bears any fruit, if it helps them put together any connections. So one of the things, QAnon is dropping details about, and sadly, a lot of it hasn't come to pass. There have been a lot of promises that we don't see the evidence of yet, but he's saying that there's hundreds of indictments, sealed indictments for people famous people that we've all heard of, involved in politics and involved in business, who, supposedly are going to get arrested for everything from pedophilia to financial fraud and treason and all sorts of things. But the reality that this seems to go along with, and this is all stuff that, most of it is the stuff that you could be, if you were a LARPer, just playing along with. Like, oh, it's a convenient time to have a game like this because, for instance, what happened in Saudi Arabia, where all those royals got arrested and they're holding them in a hotel room, or in the lobby of a hotel, making them sleep on the floor until they agree to give up 70% of their wealth, because supposedly it's all ill-gotten gain, and they should give it back to the people, basically. So you could think, well, there's an example, and that's what QAnon has done, is try to take credit for that and say, oh, that's part of the whole coup that's going on. And he says, you can't believe the media; they're not going to tell you what's going on. John McCain and Hillary Clinton, for instance, they're wearing some sort of orthopedic boot because of some injuries that both of them had individually. But QAnon says, well, actually, that's just hiding their ankle bracelet because they're actually under house arrest waiting to be prosecuted. So that's all very interesting, and that's why I ended up going back to 4chan a couple 3 weeks ago when QAnon started posting a lot, saying that, well, it was back when the president was on his tour where he went to Saudi Arabia, then he went to all these places in Asia. And so the whole time he was gone, QAnon was telling people that, oh, when he comes back, that's when everything's going to get started, and he's going to make this big announcement. And the only thing, everyone waited for this big announcement. The White House actually did say, we have a big announcement. I forget what he even said, because it was nothing. When he finally came out and made his big announcement, it was a complete anticlimax. But he made this weird gesture of drinking Fiji water out of a bottle with both hands in this awkward manner that a lot of people have interpreted as being some kind of message. And I, in fact, have my own interpretation of it. And the reason why someone would look for that is because amidst all this stuff about all the criminal activity of various elites, and I'm talking about people all over the world, the Saudi royal family, the British royal family, politicians in Europe and the United States, England, Canada, and Hollywood even, QAnon is trying to link that, which I see is not a bad claim. It lends a lot of credence to what he's saying. All the people that are getting in trouble in Hollywood for sex offenses, all of them have been rendered mute now. They cannot jump in and be used politically against the president right now because they can't speak. They're running away from the press right now. They would just end up defending themselves if they tried to say anything against the president. So it could very well be that this is what's happening in Hollywood right now, is a operation to neutralize political enemies. But the reason why people would think that, why they would look for cryptic clues, like, is there a meaning in him drinking Fiji water on camera? Well, amidst all the more straightforward information that he drops, QAnon also has all of these very obscure phrases that he uses. He's telling you that they're clues to a mystery. He implies that there's these big government secrets that are going to be disclosed having to do with, at first people thought it was aliens. And he said something about benevolent ETs, that would be on down the road after the coup happens. We'll disclose the existence of benevolent ETs. So that's the way most people took that. But then he put out a bunch of other stuff that I saw and I understood the meaning to, that I don't think very many people have. But he's implying that there's more to the geography of the world than what we're told. And I don't know, I don't myself have a complete theory about what the geography of the world is, but this is something that I subscribe to at this point. I would say most definitely. I think that there's territory in the world that we don't know about. And it could be everything from what has become quite popular now, the idea of, Antarctica is really an ice wall. The territory we see on our map is really something that occupies a flat surface, not a ball, and that there's other stuff beyond the ice wall that we don't even know about. So that's the modern and popular flat earth theory. That is one example of, how you could think about this. I'm also just entertaining the general idea of what I was saying before about there being another dimension, but it's not just something that you have to, take a bunch of drugs to experience or something. I'm thinking you could actually just go there and see it if you knew the right places to go, where it would be literally like climbing a mountain that's high enough that when you get to the top, you can look down and see all sorts of things that you couldn't see before that you didn't even know existed because you're seeing it from a higher perspective. So I'm thinking that this is what he's implying, and I would really have to kind of go through. I probably need to go on my website to remind myself some of the things that have been said, and a lot of it has happened even recently. I haven't had a chance to respond to it yet, but I've seen it. At this point, okay, I know this is going to sound pretty wild, but okay. People think that QAnon is so close to the president that he might even be the president himself. That's been implied in some of the posts. You can tell that it's this. There's one identity that's posting the stuff that's really from him, from QAnon himself. Because when other people go in there and they try to pretend to be him, they don't have the same what they call trip code. They don't have the same ID that's identified with his posts. So we know what has actually come from QAnon. And some of the things that have come from him specifically really do make you think it's the president himself. Plus, there's things that the president has said in his own posts on Twitter and even in public where it seems like he's acknowledging it. So the other day he posted something, it was on this place called magapill.com. And he was posting a link to it was a list of his accomplishments. But if you were to just click from that link that he linked to on his Twitter to the main page of this website, magapill.com, the first post you would have seen on that day that he did it on Twitter was about QAnon. So other people picked up on this right away and said, hey, look, the president's linking to this crazy conspiracy site. But he didn't acknowledge that, and he kept the link up. I don't know, I saw it like over 24 hours later. It was still there. But the website itself, magapill.com, had been attacked. And the guy who ran the website said, we're under attack. You can't silence us. We'll be back soon. So someone hacked this guy. It's obvious because the reason why is because here's the president linking to a website that's telling you about QAnon, and that is serious. It legitimizes it. And so I absolutely think that website was taken down probably by spies from the state because they didn't want to legitimize this. Now, I don't know how real it is in terms of, is this guy really from the president? But I don't think it's just what the critics try to tell you, which is that, it's some loser in his mom's basement pretending. I mean, it's either what it presents itself as, which it probably isn't, because nothing ever is, or it's, a psyop where we're seeing a war between factions and they're putting it on the internet. They're using the people of 4chan to have this information battle, and the character of QAnon is a way of doing it. But so what that means to me is either way, the president is in on it to some extent. And you can kind of tell from the things he's posted. There's another thing where he did plus in one of his emails or one of his tweets. And he put that, I'm talking literally 3 plus signs plus an exclamation point. He put that at the end of one of his tweets. And it was just seconds apart, they said, from when the same code was posted by QAnon on one of the first posts on 4chan. So things like that definitely indicate the president is in on it. Okay, so the president's in on it, and there's all sorts of hints in the material that what is being claimed to be disclosed in the future has to do with, like I was saying, other territory that's hidden by the manipulation of our perception of light and therefore our ability to see the other dimension. And I can get into that a little bit more. I don't know if you've seen. I mean, have you looked at, I guess, the stuff that I put up the last week or so? Probably.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here, was this idea of a plus ultra secret society, how that connects to Disney's Tomorrowland. I know you've done a couple of posts on that, and that I think also connects to these what you're calling hidden hyperspace kingdoms. And yeah, I would love for you to flesh those ideas out.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning about the hidden hyperspace kingdoms. That is something that I've been writing about recently and connects directly to the plus ultra idea in ways that I didn't even know about until, maybe a year ago. So what I'm talking about is a hidden hyperspace kingdom is a place that exists and is hidden from the perception of most people by some sort of manipulation of dimensions, manipulation of your perception of light. Holographic, basically. But so people can live there and no one else will know that they're there. And I absolutely think at this point that these things exist and the elite know about them and are utilizing them all the time. And there's just places of safety that they go whenever they want to. Whenever they feel the heat from, regular Earth, they go somewhere else. So we're used to hearing that the elite go off into what they call private islands and they hide their money in offshore accounts, especially when they think they're going to get taxed or they might get arrested or something. Well, I think that they go further than that. I think there's actually other places where there's hidden territory and property and wealth and raw materials and technology that we don't know about. And I think the best way to understand it is to think about some of the ways that it has been represented fictionally. So the examples I like to give are, one, something that a lot of people are familiar with, the Atlas Shrugged novels. Or there was one novel, and then actually some of the ideas were explored in other writings of Ayn Rand's as well. But in Atlas Shrugged, the elite of society actually do go off into another place. They call it Atlantis, and they hide it with some kind of special technology. It's in the Rocky Mountains, and they have basically a hidden force field over it, so you can't see it from the air, and no one knows it's there. And this is where they go because in that novel, society's falling apart. Basically, businesses are getting taxed too much, and creative people aren't being rewarded for their efforts. So therefore they all go off in disgust to this hidden world. So that's one example. Another example from literature about, I would say, the 1930s is the work of René Damal. He wrote a novel called Mount Analogue, and he never even finished it, but it's had a lot of influence in literature. The idea is that there's a mountain in the world. It's bigger than any other mountain in the world. It's on an island that's a bigger continent than anything in the world. And this is all actually in the Pacific Ocean, but you can't see it because it's made of what he calls peridam, which is a form of diamond, but it's harder than regular diamond. And it's so dense that it actually bends light, and that's why you can't see it. It's creating a gravity. He believes in gravity. It's creating this force that's bending the light so that you can't see it. And also, if you were sailing, it would turn the currents so that your ship would just go right around it, and you didn't even know it was there. Now, I don't think he has all the technical details down exactly for how it's working, but he's got actually pretty close to describing what I think is going on. And I think saying that it's in the Pacific Ocean, he may have something there, because his argument was that he was talking about the fact that there's a half of the globe, if you look at it as a globe, where most of the land mass is on that side. And there's really only a couple things. There's Australia and a couple of islands really on the other side. Oh, and Antarctica, supposedly. So there's actually a term in geography for this called the hemisphere of land and the hemisphere of water. If you go to Google Earth and just look at the Pacific Ocean, you can turn the ball in such a way that everything is blue completely from their perspective. That half of the ball is completely water. And so René Damal was saying, well, there's got to be something else there gravitationally balancing the planet. So that was his whole idea, was based on that. He dreamed up the existence of this mountain because it seemed like physically it just had to be there. But it, of course, matches up with what people have been saying since ancient times about where the gods live, and the idea that there's a pole holding up heaven, and that it is this mountain, in fact. That Atlas is, in fact, a mountain or a pole that's so high that the top of it you can't even see from here, because it's in another dimension and it's holding up heaven. It's holding up that other dimension. So that's what Rene Damal was describing. And I think it does exist. I don't know if it's exactly what he was thinking, because he was thinking about a round ball Earth and just trying to think of what could be in the middle of that water that's on the other side, all that water of the Pacific Ocean. But what I'm seeing is just that it could be more complicated than that, I guess. I think that Donald Trump's, or I mean, not even him, Trump and QAnon's clues that they've put in about Fiji and Malaysia, there's some clues about Malaysia. I think that those are pointing to this idea. And in fact, it's very close to Fiji, the place where Rene Damal said that Mount Analogue actually is. And strangely, around the time that I figured this out, and I was telling my friend about this, and my friend was telling me about how the antipode of Jerusalem is right around that same place. As we were talking about this in a restaurant about a few days ago, at that exact moment, that exact hour of time, there was a major earthquake right there in that part of the ocean. And there was a tsunami warning for all the islands that are there. It was just an amazing coincidence. I'm not saying that I have magical abilities or anything like that. Maybe psychic abilities. I'm not saying I caused it, that's for sure. Maybe I picked up on that it was coming, and that's why I started talking about that at that moment. But it was just a weird coincidence, and there's so many in this story. But to get to the plus ultra thing and how it really just undeniably connects, I went looking for it, because at a certain point I was like, this dude is reading my website. You know, there's no way, because he started talking about Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland is another one of those examples, okay? In Disney World, they have something called Tomorrowland, and they also had a movie called that. And then there was even what seems like a role-playing game or some kind of video game or something going on the internet that's related to Tomorrowland. It's called Plus Ultra, or Stop Plus Ultra, I think is what it's called, the game. And it's because in the story of Tomorrowland, there's a hidden hyperspace kingdom that's called Tomorrowland, where the elite, and specifically elite scientists, go to have and enjoy a society made with technology that they don't think regular society is ready for. So, you know, it's another example of the elite going off and hiding and having things that we would love to have, you know? It's just like in Ayn Rand's story. And then the same thing even was going on in Rene Damal's story. Like, they had an elite society there. Only the chosen could get in to the island if you happened to find it. Even then, you were challenged. You weren't just allowed to live there. You were given a bill as soon as you arrived, and then you had to get jobs to try to find a way to pay your bill off. And if you didn't, then they killed you. So this is a ongoing theme here in literature that I think reflects a reality of what's going on, which is that the reason why the elite seem like they're so brazen and unafraid of us is because they really do have places they can run away and hide to, where they know that no one will ever find them. And they have, you know, they're not really that afraid that you might take their money, because that's just a fraction of what they have stored up and what their real home is. So this is the idea, I think, that's behind Plus Ultra in a way, and the Disney franchise is definitely using it specifically for that meaning. And then I found out that, well, I noticed that QAnon kept referring to this, using all the same kind of phrases that I was using in my articles. He specifically mentioned Tomorrowland too. He also mentions Alice in Wonderland, which is a story about going into a hyperspace kingdom, and Sleeping Beauty. Okay. His references to Sleeping Beauty, and especially a lot of them recently, it's obvious. Again, he's specifically talking about, I think, something I wrote in one of my articles. And I also put it in a video that I put out. So beauty is that middle pillar that I was telling you about, that is represented in the Masonic tracing boards as being the pole beyond the poles in the higher dimension. Because in Freemasonry, and also the place where they got it from in the Kabbalah, there's these three pillars, and the one in the middle is called the pillar of beauty. There's wisdom and strength and beauty. The middle pillar is beauty, and it's asleep because it's hidden from view, and it only kind of gets activated when you go into it and become aware of it. So the way that he was using that phrase, it's very specifically about that. And I'm the only person to have talked about it in any recent times, as far as I know. And I didn't get it out of any book either. I just sort of saw that, that connection. And so I went looking for Plus Ultra plus QAnon to see if he'd been to my website, because, I mean, it's obvious to me he'd been to my website. I wanted to see if anyone else had pointed that out, if anyone else was talking about it. And sure enough, I found a post that had been made, not by someone calling themselves QAnon, but by W.H. Anon, calling himself a White House insider. But this post was made about a month before the QAnon stuff started. But he was foreshadowing it. He was saying, big things are coming. You just wait and see. There's going to be a big revolution. And talking about how Donald Trump is part of the secret society called Plus Ultra. And they pointed out that he's got this phrase in the tiles and wall decorations of his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida. And then they talked about how apparently his uncle was, I guess, a nuclear scientist and involved working for the Navy, and was actually in charge of examining Nikola Tesla's materials, his personal possessions, immediately after he died. And his job was to do this on behalf of the government to see if Tesla was doing anything dangerous. So Trump's uncle had access to things that no one else has seen since then, they say. And this is a fact. I mean, I looked that up, and that is true. So what's implied in this post that was made in early September by this person that I'm certain now is the same person who later called himself QAnon. He's saying the president is part of this thing called Plus Ultra, that there's all this stuff in the world that you don't know about, but he's going to reveal it to you, the world beyond. And, that it's connected to Tesla technology, which implies free energy. And that goes along with the fact that the reason why he calls himself Q is because he has Q level security clearance. And that's a security clearance specifically designated for the Department of Energy. So since the beginning, since a couple or 3 weeks ago when he started posting as QAnon, he's been implying that there's free energy coming, free energy technology. Which only makes sense because it goes along with the ability to make a hyperspace force field that will make something invisible, like what I'm describing. So that's what I think that's what's being implied. That's the narrative here. Now, I could be all wrong. I could be totally wrong about, the hyperspace kingdoms and all that. Maybe I'm believing something that's really just a myth, but I'm reading these symbols of the myth correctly, and they are using it. They're using the myth. They're using even my interpretation of it. And it's being used by people definitely connected to the White House for PSYOP purposes, if nothing else. And so that's where I'm at. I'm decoding their PSYOPs. They're using my material. We're basically talking to each other. When QAnon posts, especially the last week, I know that he knows I'm reading it, and there's certain things that are in there just for me. So I don't know what to tell you except that we've got this funny little game going on, and I'm just waiting to see an actual revelation to show me that it isn't a LARP, because as far as I can tell right now, it could still be a PSYOP. I'm hopeful, but I think it'd be great to see some evidence here that this is a well-intentioned, real revolution and not just a PSYOP. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, that is quite a lot of thought-provoking material in there for sure. I mean, LARP or not, it's a fascinating story at the very least. And the way that you were just describing it, how it relates to you personally, that does seem to mimic in a way the character that's based on you in your novel Genuflect. You know, this person who leads this really, exciting life, and she gets kind of sucked into this. I don't want to call it like a geopolitical game because it's much more than that. But did you maybe sort of hyper sigil your way into this spot here?
Maybe so. I mean, I didn't see this coming because, yeah, in the novel, the person gets involved with a group of elites in England who, I mean, the main character sort of based on me. They're in England getting sucked into this conspiracy world where there's a cult of Mithras operating kind of in the shadows, doing Pizzagate type stuff to molesting children and things like that to try to control politicians. And she gets involved with this person that's blatantly based on Michael Bloomberg, and who literally did just open up an office building where he brought an ancient temple of Mithras, a Roman temple of Mithras, from the place that it had been sitting badly restored down the street back to its original location. And now that's the bottom floor, like the basement of his new office building in London. So I wrote a story where a bunch of horrible occult rituals happen there, and the character based on Bloomberg is really this Mithras cultist, and he's trying to not only take over the world, but kind of turn the world into a kind of artificial prison and ascend it to a higher realm where he's going to rule us from above. That's just kind of a short version of the story, but what's funny, yeah, because that was a character based on me becoming involved with Michael Bloomberg, and I've been expecting actually something from Bloomberg, like some kind of threat or lawsuit or something, No, I don't think that he actually would be successful in suing me because I really haven't done anything wrong. I don't think I've broken the law at all, and I haven't lied about him at all. But
All right, so I kind of want to go over a little bit of stuff, but I think that's kind of interesting. She mentions Michael Bloomberg, and we're gonna go ahead and just see. Look, is she making this stuff up? No. You've got the Guardian that in 2017, November 8th, reconstructed Roman Temple of Mithras opens to public in London. I think let's see. Housed in Bloomberg's European headquarters. Anyways, so that's that. Now, what's interesting with Plus Ultra, of course, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with reusing all these names over and over again, so it's harder to find through all these search algorithms. But Plus Ultra, here's what she's talking about with the earlier with the coat of arms of Spain, flanked by the pillars of Hercules. If you do a search for Tomorrowland, the movie, you can see that it is distributed and production company is Walt Disney, and that there's a Ultra Plus. Let's see, Society. Where'd it go? They don't have it here, but hold on. Tomorrowland film. Come on. Ultra Plus Society. So in the movie, there's a fandom wiki, and there's Disney has it too. They have Plus Ultra, so they like using all the stuff, make up their stories and things like that. But yeah, Ultra Plus, Disney, they're going ahead and putting it all out there, and if you even look at other uses, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff with Ultra Plus. So another movie that's kind of interesting to watch. It's also the video game Apex Legends also has uh, the motto that's tattooed on one of the players. Anyways, I was gonna say another movie to watch that was pretty good, similar to the idea of Tomorrowland, but not quite. It's very subtle. Is Midnight Special. I think it's a pretty good movie. And when she mentions about this huge mountain, the biggest mountain, and I think she might mention it again in as we go forward, and I'm gonna keep playing it. I gotta pick up my daughter in a bit. But anyways, it's kind of like Mount Meru, and also these ideas of this hidden island is kind of shown in like that TV series Lost, the movie of Wonder Woman, and a couple of other things. That there's a way to get somewhere else. These gates, these portals. It's been around for a long time, these ancients and movies and games and stuff like that. So whether it's all just a mythology, and a myth is just a story, is all that means. And no one can really vet a story unless they were a participant in that story. Like someone tells you a story of what happened to them 2 days ago, and you're gonna say, okay, that's probably what happened, but you've got no idea, right? So would you call that a myth? No. It's just a story, just like a myth is a story. We can't figure it out. All right. One thing that I did do a search of with NASA.gov and Google is NASA.gov and Plus Ultra. And we got a lot of interesting returns. There's a Plus Ultra Technologies, and this isn't something that Tracy Twyman talks about. This is something that I've been looking into, looping it in with NASA. But yeah, Plus Ultra Technologies awarded $100,000 for this thing. 1998. They've got even a lot in NASA.gov. Again, this is all on NASA.gov sites. It's not like I'm going to some random site. This is the official site of NASA. And again, you're going to see Dr. George Mize, Plus Ultra Technologies, Dr. James Powell, Plus Ultra Technologies. And even here in Plus Ultra Mars Perspective Energy and Material Sources. Interesting about this is you've got the same thing. George Mays, Plus Ultra Technologies, Shoreham, New York. What's interesting to me is they don't really have a like a business email address, right? Mays@optonline.net. Maybe that is business, but it has nothing to do with Plus Ultra that I can think of. And then you've got Jack Jones, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Sorry. Looking at something else. John Panigua, Plus Ultra Technologies Incorporated, Shoreham, New York. He's using his Yahoo address. You got James Powell, Plus Ultra, and again, this can all be synced up to this, which is NASA.gov site. James Powell at gmail.com, 1132 at gmail.com. Why? And Jesse Powell, I guess they're brothers or sisters, whatever, at coast.uscd.edu. Again, no business address. They're using their own, I guess, personal addresses. Why do they have that? Interesting thing also I noticed. There's Lynn Rothschild, works at NASA Ames Research Center. We got Rothschild at NASA. Okay, so I'm going to continue on with the interview that Tracy Twyman did, and it's 42 minutes and 2 hours left, so I'm going to try and speak less.
I was expecting some kind of, some action from him so far, and I think there may have been, but I think it's all been behind the scenes, nothing direct. I think that he might have helped to get me kicked off the radio the other day when I was on, but anyway, because I was talking about him and I was on with like millions of people listening, and all of a sudden I got caught.
Wait, was
I
that
didn't
on
see it
Coast
having
to
to
Coast?
do anything. Yeah, Coast to Coast,
Yeah.
which I've been on, many, many times before for over 20 years. So it was really weird for me to be treated like that all of a sudden. And I think it was probably Bloomberg. But I didn't see the Trump thing coming because, I have not had a strong opinion about him. Like, I know that everyone really passionately hates him. I don't. And then there's some people that have these kind of what seem to me to be just childish fantasies about him, being able to save them somehow and save us. And I've always just tried to be skeptical of that. I didn't vote. I don't vote. I don't believe in, I don't philosophically believe in voting, so I don't participate. But I guess my opinion about Trump has just been, I hope for the best. Like, I mean, if you were to take it at face value, if you don't think it's all a sham and that he's in on it, that he's faking everything, then what you've got is a guy that's not part of the club who's actually in charge, in a seat of what should be a seat of power. If they weren't circumventing his rights, he should actually be in control of the military and he should be in control of all sorts of things. But we know the truth is that there's 17 different security clearances above that of the president. And there's all sorts of things going on that they don't even let the president know about. And they're used to pushing the president around. And he's basically just an actor who goes out and makes speeches. So they're not used to someone trying to actually exercise power from that seat. If that's what he's actually doing, then all I could say is, I wish him the best. And it's a dangerous position to be in, obviously, that he would have put himself in if it was true. Then if he's not lying, then here's a wealthy guy who had everything going for him, had no reason to want to muck up his life in any way. And he's put himself, behind, in the crosshairs of every sniper that you could hire in the world. Everybody is waiting for a clear shot. And they're open about that. The CIA has basically put their own spokesman out on TV to kind of openly threaten to kill the president. And so you got to think he's put himself in a very dangerous position. He either did that unwillingly because they've got him by the balls somehow. They've got him on camera raping kids or something. And so he's a slave like all of them and he has to play this role. Or he's willingly put himself in danger for some reason. So all I can say is I hope for the best. I can't tell at this point what's going on. It's very complicated, but it seems like they don't like him. The establishment, the ruling class did not want this person to be in power. They do not want him to get his way with anything. So that you can't help but be sympathetic to that and hope that he can get his way, because otherwise that means they get to keep doing what they're doing. And we know what direction they're marching us into. It's been going on for a while and you can tell where it's headed. And, I don't even think I need to summarize it for the audience. I think you all know. So I guess what I'm saying is, to answer your question, yes, it's kind of like my novel, because in the novel, yes, a person who's just an esoteric writer and even a self-published writer at that, of a writer about obscure subjects, which is what I am, ends up being influential in current events and politics because of her influence on the elite, because they are actually into the occult and they end up reading her stuff to try to get information about their own rituals and their own beliefs. And in reality, yeah, I think that does happen. That has happened. I mean, I have, for one thing, yeah, I've seen my ideas influence the public, in a way, in many cases. I don't want to go over it because it would sound bad. I don't like to brag. I really don't like to come off like an arrogant person. And if I would tell you what things in society really have a lot to do with me and my influence, it would sound like I'm very arrogant. I can't help but notice, okay? And so I'm not that surprised that things that I've written about end up being used for psyops, because they get used for TV, they get used for movies, they get incorporated into the general philosophy of people, and so does it happens for anyone who's putting out information that's true, that's powerful, that strikes a chord, of course it's going to influence everybody. So I don't have any doubt that I've had an influence. But I also know about magic. Meme magic is one example, and that's what, had a lot to do with what put Donald Trump in power. So my book itself, I expected it to be kind of magical in a way, and I've been seeing it ever since publishing it. In fact, before then, I noticed that things that I would write about would start to happen in real life, even just as I was writing it. And after I published it, it started even more. And so I'm talking about everything from strange anomalies in the sky, like the ones I write about, to geopolitical events, financial events. There have been quite a few of them that correspond to things that were in my novel. But as far as, the fact that this is what it seems like, maybe me writing about hidden hyperspace kingdoms in the very direct way that I did, this is just what I have a tendency to do, is just completely open up a whole package of occult symbolism that's been hidden in plain sight, hidden under allegory for centuries. And I'll come along and start researching that topic, and I'll just blow it open. So, I've done that with money. I did that with Baphomet. I did that with the mystery of Rennes-le-Chateau and the Priory of Zion. And now I'm doing it with Plus Ultra and the hidden hyperspace kingdoms. And what that forces the elite to do, the ones that, are the hidden sort of spiritual elite, they know about all of the really weird stuff like this. They're initiated into the really occult stuff. When you bring it out into the open, like I do, then they have to operate within that new paradigm. So I kind of feel like I forced the issue with the hidden hyperspace kingdoms. It had already been coming out. It was about to come out because flat Earth was becoming very popular. And that's just people becoming aware that there's more beyond, there's more territory than what they're telling us. That you can't just rely on Google Earth and Google Maps to tell you what place it is that you're living in and what direction even is. So, people are primed to look for that, for hidden territory. And so, for me to bring it out in the open and say, hell, you got to look at hyperspace too. And you got to look at that as a way. We know that the compass doesn't work in the way they tell us it works. It's not telling us the same thing that the mainstream science has always said. It means something else. The directions mean something else, And so now people, enough people know that it's, the elite have to now cop to that and explain it and say what side they're on, basically. If Donald Trump already knew that, and the Rothschilds already knew that, and Donald Trump really is against the Rothschilds, which is what he's implying with the QAnon posts, well then, now that I've revealed that there's hidden hyperspace kingdoms, they have to tell you what side they're on. So Donald Trump is saying, oh, well, yeah, I'm on your side, people. I'm going to show you the hidden hyperspace kingdoms, and I'm going to let you have access to all of the wealth and land that's there. You need to be on my side because these other people, they're trying to hide it from you. Well, he wouldn't have said that before, I don't think. And because he would have sounded crazy. But now, and probably because also he wanted to keep it secret for him too, There's no reason why they want to reveal their secrets. But once it gets revealed in a way that they can't put it all back in the package, and they can't hide it anymore, then they have to start dealing with it. That's what I think is going on.
Well, shit, Tracy. I mean, that is people should just go research it because we don't even have enough time to dig into some of the even more esoteric aspects of just the 4chan stuff. But I mean, you've done a good job so far of breaking that down.
I want to apologize for not putting in a lot of details of, interpretation of symbolism. But the reason why is because I would have to explain every single symbol, and that would end up being another several paragraphs of me talking. And I don't want to ruin the total flow of what we're doing here. But I've got some articles on my website that explain this. And I'm going to be doing more. In fact, I'm going to have to, by the end of this week, put out a video explaining everything about QAnon and how it relates to what I just talked about, the Plus Ultra concepts. Because only when you see it all put together like that will you see, I'm not just projecting this and seeing a reflection of myself in everything. I'm not making this up. It really is there. And once you see that, it's really going to blow your mind, guys. But yeah, if I explain to you all these weird little phrases and what they mean, it'll just take too long. So that's why I'm being vague, and I'm sorry, but I just have to.
No, it's totally cool. And I think the best way for people to absorb this information is to get it on their own, like that's, I think, the way that I don't want to say that you convince yourself that something is real, and I'm using real in quotation marks, but I think it's the best way to absorb information is just to digest it on your own. It's one thing to hear two people talking about it on a podcast, but I think it's a lot more impactful on you when you have the space with yourself to absorb it, read it, watch videos about it. We'll definitely link to all your pertinent blogs and your videos on this in the show notes. But I do want to spend some time here, what time we have left, talking about your novel Genuflect. And you kind of summarized it several minutes ago. There's another way to summarize it in just like a few words, and I think you wrote it yourself. It's just about an alchemical ritual to sacrifice and regenerate the sun as well as the other classical planets. So, you talked about this in several other interviews, but for those of us that are not familiar with what that statement means, this alchemical ritual to sacrifice and regenerate the sun, what is that exactly, and how does it play a role in your book?
Well, the idea is you would do a ritual where you would entice these spirits that possess the 7 classical planets. We're talking about the planets that ancients could see with their own eyes. You're working within a viewpoint where they are spirits. They're what are called aeons, and they occupy the 7 heavens above us. And the sun and the moon are also included in those 7 classical planets. So each one of those has their own heaven. And so if you did such a ritual, you would be calling down those spirits into physical bodies, enticing them with sex in the sex ritual, because that's what even the gods themselves, according to myths, sometimes cannot resist certain types of sex offered to them if they come down and take physical form. So we're talking about a ritual where the 7 gods are enticed to come down from heaven into physical form, where they then become vulnerable and can be sacrificed. Then you take the sacrificed gods, including the physical bodies that they occupied, and render them alchemically through a physical process to turn them into a new egg of a new aeon. And what we're talking about really is kind of a new universe. I hate to use that word because, of course, the word universe implies that there's only one, but a new reality, I guess, and that's really what I think the Gnostics meant when they used the term aeon. They're not the only ones to use it. I mean, it's just a Greek word, but it implies a reality, an entirety of its own. But what's hard to grasp is that you can have one reality supplant another, because the reality has time inside of it. It's kind of erroneous to even talk about one coming after the other, but that's how we talk. How we talk about the fall in the Garden of Eden as something that happened in the past. Well, that's an example of one reality supplanting another, and we think about it as happening in the past, but it's really a total reality being supplanted, so you can't even really bring time into the equation. When they talk about God creating the heavens and the earth in 7 days, and then on the seventh day he rested. Well, I've heard people say that the word that's translated as days really means aeon. And so the people that told me that were trying to say that, it's a mistranslation in the Bible. God didn't create the world in 7 days. It was 7 aeons, which means 7 epochs of time, which means that's evolution. And that's, everything that scientists have been telling you. That's what God took a long time to do it all, is basically what they're saying. But that's not how I interpret it at all. I think what we're calling 7 days are 7 aeons, but that's not what an aeon is. It's not just an epoch of time. It's an entire reality. So what is being said there in Genesis is that the present reality that we're in was created on top of 6 others. And on top of the seventh, God rested, like he sat down. It's a floor for him.
And I think that's a good spot right there that she's saying. the interpretation, if you want to really think about it, it's like, why would God need a rest? You know, someone who created all this stuff. I'm tired. I need a rest now. Or the interpretation goes, after all these aeons were created, whatever it is, we don't know, right? We weren't there unless we are them. We don't know if we have amnesia, whatever, right? Or if we're just humans that were witnessing creation, that means we were created first, and then the story's all mixed up. Anyways, like I tell everybody, no human is going to know how the world was created because humans weren't there. And if they were there, then all the stories about the order of creation has been wrong. Anyways, I think what's great is that the idea of the one who created it all just kind of sits up there, just rested on top of things rather than rested as in trying to recuperate themselves from exhaustion. Anyways, I just like that part, so I'm going to go ahead and keep playing it. We've got about an hour left, and I'll probably interject afterwards. All right.
So it's a totally new way of interpreting that phrase, but it makes sense if you start to understand this idea of stacking realities on top of one another, and that's what the role of Atlas is to hold up the reality on top of him. Atlas was a Titan. The Titans were defeated in Greek mythology by the Olympian gods, and then God ruled on top of him. Zeus ruled from on top. And we are part of the world that is supporting the realm of the gods that's on top of us. So this is a running theme throughout Genuflect. And the reason why, it's part of why it's called Genuflect. It's talking about the role of the subservient, supplanted, enslaved Aeon and the people trapped inside of it. And that role in regards to the ruling class or the gods that rule above you, whatever is on top of you. So what the villain is doing in my story is trying to escape this prison and be the one on top. And it involves destroying the pillars that uphold, the invisible pillars that hold the realms that are on top. The way to do that involves, like I said, bringing the gods down into physical form and then destroying them. That breaks the pillars. It's actually what ends up breaking the pillars in the ritual is the sex itself, because the victims of the rape that take place in the sex ritual, they are gods too. And in my story, the one that gets the worst of it, the sort of climax of the ritual that really destroys the foundation of Earth and makes the pillars start to collapse, is the victimization of a child that has embodied the spirit of Uranus. So that's the realm beyond Saturn. That's the highest heaven that we have perception of. So when that's brought down into physical form and then violated physically in the most vile way during these rituals, that breaks the foundation of reality, basically. It's something that I decoded from rituals and from mythology, and I think this is kind of really how it works. This is part of why some really extreme sadistic sex rituals are being performed by certain secret societies, occult sects, whose membership involves, some of the world's elite, is because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find their own way to get out of this world and get into and generate a new world where they're the gods of it. And in so doing, they turn our world into something that has fallen, something that has become unreal, and you can build something on top of it. This is how I see, for instance, Atlantis. Like, in my view, Atlantis still exists. It's just under our feet. It fell, and it fell from reality into non-reality. And the Titans being in Tartarus, it's the same thing. They fell into Tartarus. They fell beneath us, and they're upholding us just like Atlas is. They're the foundation for us. But because of that, they're not real anymore. They're not alive anymore. And therefore, they've been supplanted.
So when it comes to the sun and its connection to this process, what is that exactly? Because that might be a little complex for people to digest on their own. So if you could boil it down, like this idea of replacing the sun with a new sun, and that sort of ushers in this new aeon.
Well, think about it this way. You're like Noah, right? Once you box up the old world and make it into like a little video game that you have in a box, you can stand on top of it and generate the new world from the egg that you've created alchemically, from the bodies of the gods of the previous world, right? Well, what first thing that comes from the egg, and you can check this from the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, where they go through this step by step. In the other alchemical works, it's a little bit harder to follow the steps, but in the Christian Rosenkreutz story, they lay it out. So what you do is from the egg comes the sun and the moon, the new mommy and daddy of the new order of gods. All right. So first you get a male and female come out of the egg, and they breed, and from that the other 5 planets come. But you're the god, you're the alchemist who brought the egg into the new world in the first place. And this is actually told. This story is part of the myth of Mithras. If you actually put together all the divergent stories of Mithras and put them together into one biography, what you get is a character who is seen coming up out of the ground, basically out of a rock. He's seen emerging, being born from a rock with a torch in one hand and a knife in the other. He comes into this world. He conquers all of the gods of this world, and with each god that he conquers another heaven. He ascends higher and higher up the different steps of heaven to get to the higher realms. Then he bursts through Uranus, through that highest level that we associate with the fixed stars. So in other words, through the ceiling of the sky, and he takes over that world. But we don't really know. It's implied that he takes over that world. He's the new sun. That's how he was worshipped. But the way I see it, this is all one story, and it never has an end. Because once he goes up through the top, he's seen in the next world coming up through the bottom, coming out of the rock. That's how he gets born. And this is exactly, I haven't mentioned this in the interview yet, but a lot of ideas I get from my research sometimes come to me through Ouija board seances that I do with friends and family every now and then. And recently we were talking to Mithras after I wrote my novel, Genuflect, that had all the Mithraic stuff in it. I wanted to ask Mithras if, what I had said was true, if I correctly interpreted his mythology. And I asked him if he knew what was beyond the fixed stars, beyond the realm of Uranus, and if he had ever been there, if he could describe it. And he said he didn't know what was up there. And I said, did you ever try to go up there? And he said, yes. So I said, what happened when you went up there? And he goes, the planchette went all the way up through the top of our board. And our board is specially designed so that it kind of looks like the inside of a Masonic lodge. And there's actually a ceiling on the top decorated with little tassels. So the planchette, in order to represent what happened to Mithras, the planchette goes all the way up through the ceiling represented on our board. Then it went off the board and slid underneath it and tried to go as far underneath it as it could. And when I grabbed the planchette and put it back on top of the board, it went down to the bottom and then up again. So it was showing me this loop. And then I asked, is that what you were telling us, that you went in a loop? And he said, yes. So, and it took me a couple months to realize, after hearing that on the Ouija board, that that's actually what the myth of Mithras tells you. Because on one end of the myth, they're telling you about him conquering the realm beyond the sky, the hyper-Uranian realm. And then you just have to put that together with the story of his birth, and you realize that's what's going on. He keeps trying to get out of the matrix, but every time he gets out, he just comes back up through the floor of the next one. So, yeah, I think there's a ritual to try to conquer this, try to conquer the world you're in and become the god of another one. But I don't think it always works out. And I think that's an example of what can go wrong. And maybe that's what always happens. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it's, like I said, it's fascinating. I have two more things I want to touch on. The first is, it connects to this directly, but it's this goddess Cybele, and you say in your book was symbolized by a stone. And I think Cybele is one of those characters that is not really well known enough. So could you tell us a little bit about who Cybele is, how she connects to your story, and then what this stone symbology really means with her?
Well, I think as far as the stone symbology, I'll just say right now, I think that the stone is like the cosmic egg. It's a cosmic egg of a universe or reality. So she came from one of those, and she is one of those too. So she's, it's just like being a female. You came from a woman, and you also have the ability to be a mother. And that's what she is. But whatever it is that is the womb she came from and the womb she is, can be represented to us as a stone. Now, it's hard to say exactly what that is, but I think we kind of have the right idea when we think about an, artificial simulation, and think even it like as a board game that's boxed up. It's all in a container, and if you're on the outside of it, it just looks like a box. On the inside, it looks really complicated, but on the outside, it's just a box. So it's kind of like a stone. And I think it could even literally be a stone if you think about it as like a crystal that has very complex facets inside of it. Because the way that light moves through the facets of crystals is itself a language. And I know they even build computers based on this now, and are predicting that they'll have even more amazing computers in the future, specifically based on this, what I'm describing here. It's also, that's something that even is used in ritual magic. This is what John Dee's Enochian magic was. It's a language of the way that the angles that light takes when it goes through crystals. Now, and also I just want to point out, even in the Bible, they compare God and his kingdom to stones. And they talk about the New Jerusalem being this giant cubic crystal, and then you can go inside of it. And when you go inside and actually see God sitting on his crystal throne, he himself is a stone. They describe him as being a crystal. So now it could be that there's more to it, like when you finally get into that higher dimension, that you can see it in a different way. But to our eyes right now, if we were to see God and his New Jerusalem kingdom, it would look like a stone. So I think, maybe when they talk about Cybele, or I guess I've been corrected a few times now. People told me I'm supposed to say Cybele or Cybele. That I think that it could be a similar thing. And usually she's said to be black. But again, that doesn't mean that she was always black, because stones can absorb light and change color over time due to their exposure to various types of light. So just to briefly summarize her myth and how it connects to everything I've been talking about. So she was supposedly born from a rock and born a hermaphrodite in Olympus, in the realm of the gods. And they thought that she was a freak because she had both sex organs. So they castrated her and then kicked her out of heaven, and she fell down to earth. And then she somehow got pregnant and had a son. And then she was in love with her son and got jealous when he wanted to marry another woman. And so then she inspired him with madness and to castrate himself and let him die of bleeding to death. And then a few days later, she felt guilty about that and resurrected him. And that's how he became Attis and her sort of co-regent as a goddess, ruling. She's kind of thought of as the goddess of the state. Like she was very, very much associated with the state in Rome and, the upholding of order. And her priests were all castrated men who would then from that moment on be called priestesses, and they would speak in a high-pitched voice and act effeminate and be considered women. So, she's a castrated hermaphrodite. Her priests are castrated men, and, she's associated with the state. And it was a cult that was imported from Anatolia and Persia into the Roman Empire and made into sort of a state cult as well. Well, similar thing happened with Mithraism. It was also imported from Persia. It was oftentimes those two cults were running in the same families. So you would have, well, Mithraism was an exclusively male cult, but a lot of times the men of one family would join the Mithras cult and the women would join the Cybele cult. And then I guess those men in the family that were oriented towards, attracted to being the priests of Cybele and wanted to become castrated and act and become feminine type priestesses, then they would join that. But these two cults were definitely connected, even though they were separate in some ways and seemingly at odds in some ways because of their attitude towards sex. So in the Mithras cult, like I said, it was only men. Mithras himself was said to really distaste women. He did not like women at all. And in fact, when he wanted to breed a son of his own, he was said to have ejaculated onto a rock. And, it became, because he was born from a rock and they said that lightning inseminated his rock, right? So he somehow did the same thing to a rock, and that became his son Diorphos. And you can tell from the name Orphos that we're talking about the Orphic egg. So he's creating another reality in the same way the one he came from was created. But you have in the story of Mithras this idea of not liking women, not liking normal, male female sexual relations at all. Cybele or whatever, she was said to not like either men or women, and so that's why she chose to be something in between, and she wanted her priests to be something in between also. So here you have these two cults that are kind of against normal sex roles and against normal sexuality. And even in Mithras, they were kind of against marriage, and there were members that were married, but it was sort of looked down upon, and you were thought of as a higher person if you could refrain from relations with women. Well, they had the same kind of attitude in the Templars, and that's been revealed to be the case even just a few years ago when they released the Chinon parchment. The Vatican released it, and this is a contemporary document where the Templars confessed to the Pope. And they confessed about their sex rituals, their homosexuality, and by that I mean their policy that when you join, you had to agree to not have any relations with women, and you actually agreed that you would give in to the sexual demands of your brethren in the order to help keep them pure so that they wouldn't be tempted to have sex with women. So we have the same kind of attitude in the Templars that you had in the cult of Mithras, but then there's also some connections between the Templars and the Cybele cult. And I think that you see that they've absorbed both cults and sort of combined them. And it's probably because they had a common origin in the first place. But the way that you see Templars get buried, the ones that went to crusade, they actually got buried in a special way where they cross their legs. The way that their bodies are represented on top of their tombs is always in this manner, with their legs crossed. Well, that also happens to be the way in which Attis was always depicted, because he always looks like he just got castrated and he's holding his crotch and with his legs crossed because he's uncomfortable. That's the way these Templars look when they're represented on their graves. The other thing connecting those two cults with the Templars is the deity or demon Baphomet that they worshipped. Because Baphomet is, well, for one thing, his name is connected to Mithras. Aleister Crowley said that the name could be rendered as Father Mithras. And then he pointed out a lot of other connections between symbolism associated with Baphomet, the cornerstone of the Temple of Solomon, and then the fact that Mithras is said to be a stone. Aleister Crowley was describing Mithras as being the cornerstone of the temple and saying that that's what Baphomet is too. Well, in addition to that, there's also the connection with Cybele, because really one of the biggest sources of information that occultists have always had about what Baphomet was is this book that was only until recently in Latin, and I've had it translated into English, but this book has influenced everything that has been written about Baphomet since about 1820 when it came out. And that's called Mysterium Baphometis Revelatum by this guy, Hammer Perkstall, Joseph von Hammer Perkstall. And what this book has is a bunch of illustrations of artifacts that were found on former Templar properties where they have depictions of the idols that they worshipped in their secret rituals and depictions of the rituals themselves, the sex rituals with children and animals. And in these depictions, they show what Baphomet really was. And you can tell that it is Cybele, but she's been castrated. It's a male that has been castrated and made into a goddess. And the way that this being is depicted in these artifacts is consistent with the way Cybele was depicted, having this crown of towers on her head, and several other things that are the same. But even though the myth of Cybele was that she was a castrated hermaphrodite, that was never depicted in the imagery. Like you never in Rome, in that Cybele cult, they never just showed Cybele naked with a hole there where her male genitals used to be. But that is what's shown in these Templar artifacts, because they were practicing the secret aspects of Cybele's worship, which I don't think were ever even really documented in Rome. And so maybe they made it up, maybe they added on to it, but it's possible they just inherited it from the original Cybele cult. But we know that the Templars were influenced by the Cybele cult. Even the church fathers implied that the Gnostics had absorbed the Cybele cult. And then we know that every commentary that has been made about the Templars, where the writer believes that they were guilty of blasphemy and heretical practices, every writer says that they were practicing Ophite Gnosticism. So Ophite Gnosticism has been documented that it has absorbed the Cybele cult, and it's all part of the same doctrine. So what I'm telling you is that Baphomet, this entity that was worshipped by the Templars, and that the Templar Baphomet worship thereafter influenced the Freemasons and modern Satanists and almost every modern Western occult group. Well, that came from both Mithraism and the Cybele cult. And it seems that the figure of Mithras and the figure of Cybele are related figures. If they're not the same person, then they're related. And it seems like maybe Cybele is mom and Mithras is the child. And it's just, at some point in the story, he gets castrated, which would explain why he hates women so much. But of course, Mithras was never represented as a castrated figure. He's always represented as being, virile and strong. But like I said, his story is out of order. There's no linear way of telling the story of Mithras, because we're talking about a guy who's been beyond the sky and back. So, the fact that he's got a myth, it doesn't mean that the myth tells everything in order. He's probably the son who at one point created his own world by ejaculating onto a rock. And then at another point in his story, he's been castrated by his mother. And, Mithras was always also associated with Saturn specifically. And the priest of their order was always called Pater and associated with Saturn, called the father. Saturn, according to, his myth in the Greek mythology, his role was to be born out of the chaos out of the egg. The original egg, like Uranus and his wife Gaia. Well, originally they were one hermaphroditic being, and they were basically one closed egg, and they had, a baby or several babies inside of their womb, but they didn't want to let the babies be born, or at least the male portion called Uranus didn't want to let the babies be born because they were afraid what would happen afterwards, he was afraid he would be supplanted. But the way that reality got started and the way that supplanting actually happened was Saturn cutting himself out of the womb. So they have this story of Saturn overcoming his father, Uranus, who wanted to keep him inside of his mother's womb. They don't actually come out in the Greek myth and say, oh, it was a hermaphroditic being and everyone was trapped inside its womb. They use other phrases, but when you put it all together, then you can tell that's what they're saying, because they say that in order to get out of the womb, he castrated his father. Well, so, he castrated him while the penis was inside there, obviously. And that was the plug holding him in. Or, I think an even more complete way of thinking of it is that there were never separate sex organs in the first place. There was just one big enclosure inside of which other creatures were being created and multiplying. And they wanted to get out, and there wasn't enough room. So he cut his way out, and in so doing, he castrated his father. And that's what started everything. That's how heaven and earth, which were originally this one thing, Gaia and Uranus, got separated. And the realm that we're in now is the realm that exists in between them. This is the way the Greek myths are describing it, is we're standing on top of Gaia. We've got Uranus ahead on top of us and as a canopy. And what's holding it up is Atlas. So there's this pillar keeping the two things separated so that we can exist. And if it ever got cut, then those two things would slam back together again, and we'd be trapped inside, and existence would basically be snuffed out. So what the Mithras myth is telling you is that he cut himself out of the womb, what the Saturn myth is telling you is about him cutting himself out of the womb, and that creates the world we're in. Well, if you just connect that to the story of Mithras cutting himself out of a rock, then you see that that's the same story. Basically, what we have with Cybele and Mithras, I think, are the story of that son who has to cut himself out, and also the story of the mother and what her experience was like in this whole thing. And together, those two creatures have influenced what became the entity known as Baphomet and the worship that the Templars engaged in, which, it seems to me, from my decoding, in particular of the artifacts put forward by Hammer Perkstall, that they were conducting this exact same ritual that I'm talking about. This was the baptism of wisdom. Okay, that common rendering of Baphomet's name is that it means baptism of wisdom. Well, they're referring to the ritual that I would say were practicing for. They weren't necessarily doing the real thing, because they were just warming up to it, trying to figure out how to do the real thing. But what it is doing a ritual to destroy creation and escape and become the gods of a new realm. So that's what I've been describing to you for this whole story, or for this whole conversation. This is what I think the Templars were involved in, and what I think Baphomet, their deity, was instructing them on how to do through divination. They said that they talked to Baphomet and he gave them wisdom. This is what I think they were telling him how to do. This is what I think he was telling them what to do and how to do. And this is the meaning, I think, of Templar Baphomet worship. And I think that there's several groups today that are still trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, you've written extensively on this topic in your book, Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, I believe is the title, right?
Yes.
And, but the last thing, Tracy, that I want to touch on before we go here is diamonds. You write about diamonds in your book, Genuflect. You've also written a couple blog entries that relate back to this symbolism of the diamond and how it relates to Superman, for example, how it relates to Bloomberg, how it relates to even this crystalline sun that you touched on a few minutes ago in your explanation there. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the importance of the diamond and how it plays a role in your story, and then also how it plays a role in our reality.
Well, I think that the best way to think of it is the metaphor I keep using about the deck prism, which is an object that they used to put in ships in the floor of the deck, so that below deck, the light would shine through this crystal that's embedded in the floor of the deck. Sunlight and moonlight would go through, and then it would be amplified and refracted into the whole room. So it's an artificial light source, but it's simple and natural, not dangerous in any way, because, there's no candle, there's no open flame, there's no electricity. So the reason why I use that as a metaphor is because what I'm talking about here is the idea of the hyper-Uranian sun. It's something they imply in Freemasonry, and they hardly ever really go into detail about it, but it's in all of their symbols. And then there's something that you hear a little bit about in Greek philosophy, like Plato used to talk about this sometimes. And then there's a few other occult traditions in modern times where they'll talk about it. It's the sun beyond the sun and the sun beyond the fixed sky. Again, to understand the kind of stuff that I've been talking about in this whole interview, you really just have to throw out your disbelief for a minute and try to adapt the more ancient worldview that is only the stuff we can see that exists. So you're not thinking about anything that's been revealed by the Hubble telescope or any of that stuff. You're just thinking about, like I was saying before, the classical planets that occupy the heavens above us. And then you've got the fixed sky, the realm of the fixed stars, as being one thing, one realm in itself, called Uranus. So anything beyond that is hyper-Uranian. You've got these 7 steps. The last step is Saturn. And then the realm beyond that is Uranus. Anything beyond that, hyper-Uranian. And it really is, Uranus is like the ceiling. And if you were to think of it that way, if you had no other information to go on, then you would almost have to conclude that the sun and all the stars, all the other lights in the heavens, are bringing in light from something on the other side of that canopy. So it's just like a deck prism. And the sun then would be the main one. So what I'm talking about is the idea, yes, that the sun actually is a crystal that is bringing in light from beyond the sky. Now, they seem to quite literally depict this in Masonic symbols when they have the symbol of the royal arch and the keystone. So you'll see an arch, and quite often they'll just actually show you the zodiac signs on the arch. So you can tell it's exactly what I'm talking about. The arch of the sky, the fixed heaven, the fixed stars, Uranus, that realm. And in the middle of it, where the keystone would go in an arch, in architecture, in a building, they have their keystone, which they always represent with an I on it, or a G, or, the square and compass, one of those central Masonic symbols. They'll put that on the keystone. And sometimes they actually show the keystone removed. It's just been plucked out like a plug from a bathtub. In that case, they always show a sun, an additional sun, because you usually have the sun and the moon on either side of the arch represented. But then there'll be another thing, another light source that looks very much like the sun, usually a little bit bigger, shining through the hole in the arch where the keystone has been removed from. So what they're showing you is that there's a window in the sky, a little plug, a little portal, a hole, and if you unplug it, then the hyper-Uranian light from the sun beyond the sky can come through. And so in my novel, we have this as one of the scenes. And, I'll just say that, I envision being able to see things that you wouldn't see in normal light. In my story, doing this has a sort of, it's being done very literally in a way that everyone can see. And it's having a very literal, physical effect on the world. But I think that the symbol maybe represents something that they can do even on a smaller scale. They being the Freemasons in their private rituals in their lodge could do something to open up a smaller portal and let some of this light in for whatever purposes they use it for. But I think that they're showing us a secret, something that they know about our world that we're oblivious to. I think it's real. So anyway, yeah, I put this in my story, and I don't know what else to say about it, because it's like, you may just laugh at it, or you may think it's the most brilliant thing ever, and it kind of depends on how seriously you take modern science and space research and whether you believe in that stuff or not. Because otherwise, this is just sort of a metaphor, and it's, vaguely useful for literary purposes and nothing else. But if you believe that something like this could be literally possible, then it's going to make you look at the sun a lot differently, and in fact your world a lot differently. I take it seriously, and I take the idea that God could be a stone quite seriously. Like I was saying, that's the way he's described in the book of Revelation. And I don't see any reason why spirit can't be inside of a stone. Why would you need flesh and blood to be alive necessarily. I think that spirits just need some place of residence, but they don't necessarily need, everything that we have for our physical existence. So they could very well be inside of something that seems to us to just be a crystal. It seems like, dead matter, but really you could have a spirit inside, which is something that people who are into crystals and, people who believe in the healing power of crystals and stuff like that. Well, this is what they're believing, that there's a spirit inside the crystal, and also that it can be used to communicate. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. One, that you could have something inside of it, which I've been told on the Ouija board. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've been told that Jesus is inside the sun and the sun is a crystal. And that's the real reason why he's associated with solar symbolism, that he's really actually being crucified now, and he's on the sun cross. He's being tortured for our benefit now. The sunlight that comes out is from him. That the symbol of the Sacred Heart, for instance, is just a way of showing you this, that his energy is being bled out upon us and we're benefiting from it. And it takes the form of the light from the sun. So I can see that could just be a metaphor, but I also have the ability to see ways in which it could be very literal, and I take it seriously in that sense. I tend to do that. I tend to look at mythology, and my first instinct is to see how they could actually be telling the truth. And any sort of metaphorical usage that can be made of it is usually something secondary. That yes, you can make it into a metaphor for, morality or some other thing that you might want to use it for. But usually when you look at an ancient myth that has a lot of weird, peculiar, very specific details to it, usually they're trying to tell you something very specific and real. And so I usually take that interpretation first. And that's what I see when I look at all of the myths about the sun. And, I said earlier in this story I talked about how it seems like there's stories of the sun being killed and replaced. Yes, that's what you see in all of the creation myths, and in the Greek stories. They talk about all the different ages of, starting off with the golden age of Saturn. And then, there was a silver age and an iron age and all these other less evolved ages coming after that. Well, anyway, they're talking about different eras of different suns. I don't think at all. I guess now I have a hard time even thinking of the sun as some, atomic explosion in the sky. I just don't. It's been a couple of years now that I haven't even had that thought. It doesn't occur to me anymore. Especially now, again, I don't want to branch off into too much, but I mean, the sun is totally different to me now than it used to be a few years ago. And it fits more this definition of being a crystal than it ever was before.
Just one more thing here. I mentioned the diamond symbolism and Superman, which is in your book. That's an interesting story, I think, that if we could just wrap up on that and how it relates back to everything that we're talking about here, because, Superman is an interesting character because when you look at just even overtly, it seems to symbolize this alchemical process, with the red and the yellow coloring. And I was just curious, how you saw that and how that relates back to the diamond symbolism and this artificial sun, perhaps.
Well, I'll throw in a few things because there's quite a lot I could say about that, which amazed me. I started writing about the Superman diamond just it was a accident. I was trying to come up with something to say about this plot of land that Bloomberg's building is on in London, which in my story for Genuflect, I have a character based on Bloomberg and he's right there in that same place. So in other words, I changed the details for my novel just slightly, and almost everything is, based on reality. And the reality is that the plot of land that Bloomberg's building is on, it's this place called LBRY. And this is the place where the Temple of Mithras originally was, supposedly thousands of years ago in ancient Rome, or Roman Londinia, the Roman city of London. And it looks like a Superman diamond. It has that particular shape. And so I started writing about that because I couldn't figure out what else to call it. I mean, I looked and looked for the name of this particular diamond shape, which you see, if you ask a child to draw a diamond, they'll probably draw this shape because it's what people think about now when they think of diamond. but it's specifically the Superman logo, or it seemed to me like that was the only thing to call it. So I started talking about that in my story, and I was just trying to find something to add to it. What could be the symbolism of the Superman diamond? And so, I started writing about the name Superman, how, both the way Nietzsche used it and the way Aleister Crowley used it, because he was probably the first person to use it in English, the word Superman. And they were talking about a superhuman race to come in the future. Well, Nietzsche was talking about a race to come in the future, and Crowley was talking about breeding a divine being through sex magic. But they're both kind of related concepts. So one of the first things I mentioned is, it kind of looks like a womb. It looks like a female pelvis. And I brought up the fact that Superman always wears his underwear on the outside. He wears those yellow panties that kind of look like
yeah,
drawing attention to that part of his body and to that shape. So I first mentioned that, and I started making use out of that in the story. Then it all became much more complicated because I was already utilizing the fact that next to Bloomberg's building in the same location of Bucklersbury, next door you have the Bank of England and also the ancestral family home of the people that have always controlled the Bank of England, which is the Rothschilds. So there's the Rothschild family building right there next to him. And it's been there since like 1805 or something. And, their family lived there for the longest time. Their children would be born there. They lived there forever. Now it's just an office building. But like I said, it's been there for 200 years. And, these are the people that have financially controlled England and therefore by extension, the whole British Empire, everything that implies. And now they control all sorts of banks and essentially the finances of countries all over the world. Well, the seat of power was right there in this one spot in the city of London. And as I discovered, there's a connection with Superman. So here's what it is. For one thing, Lois Lane is based on a woman that the person who wrote Superman, his name's Jerry Siegel, who came up with the original comic strip. He used to be in love with this woman whose last name was Rothschild, and that was in his high school. And so the character of Lois Lane is based on her. And it does not say in any of these articles that are about this subject that she's part of this banking family. But just if you know the history of the family, well, they came up with the name. It was a German name. They changed it a little bit. So the family name comes from them. So she's got to be related somehow. Maybe not by blood. Maybe there's a marriage connection in her family's past that gave her the name. But one way or another, she is connected. And then, of course, I started to think, well, heck, the Rothschilds, don't they kind of control the diamond industry? Them and De Beers and what's his name? Cecil Rhodes. Those were the main figures in the diamond industry. And nowadays, Rothschild's probably the biggest. So there's that going on in my head and stuff. And then I find out what the Rothschilds family's name actually comes from and what it symbolizes. So it means red shield. And almost everybody will tell you that it's a red coat of arms with a hexagram on it, a Jewish star that they had in their shop window. Their ancestor did, their forefather, when he first opened up his shop where he was doing money lending and other things. But it's right except for what was on the sign. So it wasn't a Jewish star. It was a buckler, which is a kind of shield, a small shield that kind of looks like a cone, I guess, or a half of a circle, but it comes to a point at the end, has a kind of sharp point at the end. And honestly, I can compare this to the culet of a diamond, which is the bottom part. It's pointy, but it's also kind of rounded at the end at the same time. But the buckler is actually the red shield their name comes from. But I don't think it was just a metal shield to be used in battle. I think it was something more specific. And here's why. I think the buckler that they used as their family symbol actually was all the same as this talisman that they were said to have had. Particularly Nathan Rothschild, they said, had possession of this talisman that gave him power to be, quote, to become the Leviathan of finance. So he had a magical stone, they said. And diamond, of course, is the hardest stone. The word actually comes from adamant or adamantine. It means, hard, that you can't break it. So that goes along with the symbolism of a buckler, something that is a shield. And that even goes along with the idea of a diamond as a deck prism, because not only does the diamond deck prism in the sky bring in light from the hyper-Uranian sun, but it also acts as a filter for that light. So it's only bringing in the light we can use. It's protecting us from the wavelengths that are harmful. So this is the kind of thing that I think the Rothschild family symbol actually denotes, which is this magical object that they've used throughout their generations to make their family powerful. And it just so happens that they chose a location to base their empire in England, in the city of London, on this place called Bucklersbury. And it just so happens that that landmass is shaped specifically like what became the Superman diamond. And it just so happens that Superman is in love with a woman that is named after a Rothschild, that is based on a Rothschild. And it just so happens that I wrote a story about an alchemical ritual happening right there in that very location where they're breeding a race of Supermen. And it just so happened that the diamond that we call the Superman diamond, that I've been calling the Superman diamond, well, what that shape really is something that was invented in the 1920s called the perfect round brilliant cut diamond. And it's the most perfect way of cutting a diamond so that it will refract light into a rainbow with the greatest volume of light and the most perfect colors. And they call that fire when you shoot light into a diamond and then it comes out sparkling and scintillating through the top. That's called fire. And in my story, they actually use that as a way of cutting open the sky. So in my story, the diamond that is the sort of family heirloom to the Rothschilds is also this thing that's kind of important to the whole world, that it can act as a deck prism. That it has the power to be the new sun doing the same thing that the sun is presently doing. And it's cut in the shape of a perfect round brilliant diamond. Now, even though that was something that was only invented in the 1920s, in my story I have it that that's actually a secret that has been passed down, through initiated alchemists for centuries. And I just made that up, but it is kind of the thing that I think happens a lot. I think that a lot of our technology is based on things that have been around a long time, but just kept secret. So it could even be that this cut of diamond is one of those things. Again, I don't know if it's true or not, but I got a lot of very interesting messages on the Ouija board about the diamond, kind of confirming that idea that the round cut brilliant diamond is an alchemical secret that has been passed down. And I also just got a lot of clues kind of handed to me through fate and through coincidence, where evidence was brought to me over and over again, and still always pointing to this idea. And actually, it's a very specific idea. What it is that the shape might have been discovered by John Dee. And John Dee, he wrote one of his most important alchemical manuscripts called Monas Hieroglyphica while he was in Antwerp, Belgium. Belgium is where this cut of diamond was invented. And in fact, that's really the center of the diamond trade in the world. And it always has been. And we got messages on the Ouija board about Belgium, specifically the city of Ghent. And one of the most important things, one of the most famous things in the city of Ghent is this thing called the Ghent altarpiece that's there in the cathedral of Saint Bavo, also called Saint Boffs. And so, long story short, the saint of that cathedral, his name is kind of like Baphomet's name, and etymologically they're even directly connected. And then the Ghent altarpiece, that is the main piece of artwork that cathedral is famous for, and really the whole city is famous for, shows the sun in the New Jerusalem, and it shows all these crepuscular rays coming out of it, and they totally look like the shape of the cuts in a diamond. It looks like it's being refracted very directly out of a diamond. So I think that the message is embedded there. Oh, and another thing interesting thing about Ghent, their whole symbol, the town symbol is a goat, and they have a festival every year called the Goat Parade, where they celebrate the symbol of the goat and his connection to Saint Baph's. So I totally think there's a Baphomet connection to that city, and that it has that city is somehow the place connected to this diamond that I'm talking about, and this diamond magic or this diamond alchemy that I think exists, and the secret has been passed down for generations. And I think the Rothschilds are part of it, and that's why they have buried beneath several layers of symbolism a reference to it in their own coat of arms, where they have the buckler. And I guess I'll stop there, but I mean, there's a lot to say about those subjects. The Rothschilds, Superman, and the diamond, they're all connected, and there's so much to say about it.
Yeah, there definitely is. But one more just small detail about John Dee and his connection to diamonds in general, too, was that number 58 that you mentioned in one of your blogs, where I think you pretty much accused John Dee of being the demiurge, but
yes.
The whole, he had started writing the Monas Hieroglyphica on 1/25, January 25th, finished it on 3/31, March 31st, and those numbers, 25 and 33, correspond to that round, brilliant cut of the diamond that you were talking about, right?
Yes, and it corresponds to a number that was written on one of the Baphomet heads that was confiscated when the Templars were arrested. This is written in the logs of all the materials that they confiscated from their temples. One of them was this head called Head 58. So for a long time, I've written about the number 58 as being sort of a code for Baphomet. And so I was fascinated to find out that that's the number of facets that are in this diamond. And only if you count the culet, which is, like I said, this rounded thing on the end of the diamond. And one of the other interesting things that I've noted recently in connection to the number 33 and this diamond, the UN's logo, okay, they have the world depicted as an azimuthal projection from the North Pole. So everything that's in the world on the map is all spread out in a circle with the North Pole in the center. And then they have it cut up into 33 sections. There's like a grate that's put on top of it, and it has 33 sections. And of course, people have always thought, well, this has to do with Freemasonry, but why do the Freemasons use this? Here's why. Because there's 32 points on a compass, on a regular compass, with, the 4 cardinal directions. They'll divide that up into degrees so that there's 32 degrees. And of course, there's 32 official degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. But there's an honorary degree that they give to some called the 33rd degree. And in fact, a lot of people will even say, well, it doesn't even exist. It's a secret thing and only a few people are initiated into it. Well, that's one way of putting it. But the point is that you've got 32 compass points that are real on the known compass that measures the known world of 3 dimensions. But if you add an extra one, a 33rd degree, it's like you're saying, well, there's more beyond. There's plus ultra. There's a compass point pointing up in another direction that you didn't even know existed. And so I think that's what's implied with the number 33 and the structure that they have in Freemasonry. I think it's interesting that they have 33 segments then on the UN flag or the UN symbol, where they seem to be covertly telling you about the extra territory that exists in the world. Then you have this diamond where, yes, there's 33 facets, but one of them is curved at the bottom where the North Pole would be represented. If you were to look at the diamond as a representation of a map, because it's the bottom, everything below the pavilion, the bottom half of this diamond, that's what has 33 on it. So if you turn it upside down and look at that bottom half as a representation of the world, just like the UN logo, they're showing you 32 segments, just like there's 32 compass points. And then there's an extra one in the middle that's curved. So it's like it's telling you another dimension, another way of looking at space. What looks like an angle is actually curved. That's the extra thing. That's the mountain, the invisible mountain, and you can't see the apex of the mountain because it's up there in the other dimension. So all this stuff connects in an amazing way. And I think I've only begun really to understand the meaning of this diamond. I may have to explore it in a future novel because it's like so complicated that if I start just writing nonfiction articles about this and putting it out, yeah, it'll be taken seriously and other people will start repeating it. It will become a phenomenon all its own, but everyone will think I'm crazy. But if I put it in a novel, I think I can get away with it. So
Yeah.
that may be what I do. But I mean, I'm telling you, I can see all this stuff. I just don't know. I don't know if the world's ready to accept it yet. I hope you understand what I've been saying and how I see what these symbols are pointing to.
Well, I've been trying to understand it. Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much there. There is definitely a lot more further beyond here for sure. So, but I think that's a good place to wrap up on. Do tell people where they can keep up with you and your work.
TracyTwyman.com will always work. You can always follow that and find out what I'm doing. I may have various websites that I work on here and there, but if you just go to that URL, you'll always be able to find whatever my website is these days. And of course, if you want to find my books, you can always go to Amazon. Go to my website and find links to the books. But if you just go to Amazon, you'll find the books themselves. So that's what you should do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Tracy Twyman, thanks again for being here. I really do appreciate your time. You are a valuable, knowledgeable resource that I just can't get enough of. I just love hearing you talk, and it was nice to actually hear you on Skype on the other end of this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, got back just in time. Now, what's great is you can enter the idea that the globe Earth is not correct. It's been a big lie. Or you could think of it as the ones who are running the show, I guess you could say. They tend to have to work in some type of organized fashion, right? Whether that organized fashion is like a corporation, an agency, whatever, secret society, there has to be something like that. There has to be one way in order to keep someone from just spelling it all out. And plus, of course, if you are on the inside and you tell everybody else, who's gonna believe you, right? They've already set it up to the point where you are ridiculed for not thinking a certain way where everyone else is supposed to think the same way. It's like the one person, like the few people who figure out the magic trick and everyone else just keeps falling for it. And you go, oh, this is how the magician does it. And they're like, yeah, whatever. Well, if you think that's the way it's done, then why don't you do it? And then you go, look, this is the way you do it. Well, you don't do it so good, so obviously that's not the right way. But then you go, well, do you actually believe that person's using magic? They go, of course not. So it's funny in that regard. So when I go through in the next video, probably kind of tying the occult origins of NASA, and not even that, maybe even going further back, but not too far, right? People have to, that's weird, I get a lot of feedback, I wonder what that is. But the idea is, that's just weird stuff. The idea is that are you going to trust, like, I know a lot of people, even if they're not conspiracy theorists, you could say. It's like, hey, do you trust this billionaire, or do you trust this billionaire, or do you trust this person? And usually it starts from the political side, right? You've got like the Koch brothers, whatever. It's like, do you trust the Koch brothers? People go, no, I don't trust the Koch brothers. Do you trust George Soros? No, I don't trust George Soros. It's like, why? And then they'll go through their reasons. Maybe they just don't trust billionaires or whatever. They just don't trust people who seem to have these political agendas or whatever, But when it goes to some type of occult stuff, and when you look into them, they even say a lot of occult things. I mean, things that are, if you don't research the stuff that a lot of people have been researching now, you're just gonna say, well, that's just whatever, right? You're just not looking into it, so it doesn't matter. I liken it to it's like, all right, I'm gonna start talking in tech language, right? If you're not tech savvy, it's too bad. And then so I start talking in tech language. They're like, I don't know what you're saying. It's like, yeah, I know. So I have to tell you in ways that's not tech language speak. And they go, well, why do you have to do that? It's like, are you daft? It's because you don't understand the tech language speak. So I'm trying to explain it to you in non-tech language speak. And so you go, and they may get it. They go, okay, I get it. I know why you're trying to explain it that way, because I just don't get it in the tech way. All right, so take it in any other aspect. Some people just don't get it, so you try to explain it in so many different ways so they can understand it. And then they go, well, you're just crazy, you're insane, you're just dumb, you're reading into things too much, whatever. It's like, well, I understand all this stuff. The reason I understand it is because I study it and I look into it, and I'm basing it off of what they say, what they believe, what they think, and not based off of anyone else's just assumptions or whatnot. We don't have the answers. We just don't understand their language, I guess you could say. It's just like anything else. If I'm talking to someone, I can kind of figure out if they're lying, or if they got something going on, just like playing poker, playing a video game, just kind of have an idea of what their thoughts are just by the way that they behave, and the way that they think, and how to counter that, and all of this stuff. People go, how do you know all this stuff? And you go, I could just say it's a hunch, but it's just kind of a whole bunch of things happening at once where I get a picture, right? And am I more right than I am wrong? I would say yeah, because otherwise I'd probably be worse. I'd probably be horrible at certain things, right? And I wouldn't do it. Or if I'm so horrible at something, I'd probably try to get better, and I'd understand it. So no matter what, I'm gonna probably get to understand it more than anyone else. So anyways, it's the whole bit. But I kind of like how they ended it with the 58, and they got that too. Ultra Plus. So now I have a better understanding of that. But yeah, so Tracy Twyman, which I listened to a good amount of her stuff, but it usually goes into Knights Templar and Baphomet and a couple of other things. But this one I found is like, whoa, she's kind of like a closet flat earther, not necessarily like the flat earthers we all know. Like for me, I consider myself a flat earther, but I don't believe the flat earth, what people say the flat earth is, because they don't know either. But all I know is, look, the ones who are telling us the earth is a globe, they've lied, and they've had 2,000 years or so to provide evidence that the earth is a globe, and so far they've got pretty shoddy evidence, and that evidence doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, and that's what science is. And people go, why would they lie? There's multiple reasons for it, but if they have to hide something so big, you're gonna have to have a really big lie. And just like that how Tracy Twyman was talking about the person who was thinking, look at this globe. If I spin the globe in this way, all I see is just a whole bunch of water. There's got to be something there, not just these little tiny islands here and there. So I think, the possibility of something like, what was it, the island of Mu or something like that. I remember I did something way back. Maybe that's kind of true. The idea of when a compass points north, it's not necessarily what we think it means. I have to rethink that a little bit. Imagine north. I don't know. It just seems to make more sense if I think of north pointing towards the center. I mean, I guess that's the only different way to think of it, but to think of it as north pointing up and towards the center or something. I don't know. That is weird. I always wondered because compasses, they only work when they're horizontal. They're because, well, the way things are. But still, like, it doesn't make... I wonder. Imagine you have a compass and the closer you are to north, and it no longer stays horizontal? Even though you try to keep it horizontal? I don't know. Maybe that's like a little thing. But anyways, the entire idea. You got two ways to go at this, right? Or you got three. You could still just believe whatever you believe that they put out there. You don't believe mainstream media, and then you believe history, and you go, well, if today's mainstream media is tomorrow's history, then do you believe in history? Then they go, well, you go, no, because you got to think this through. And I never have these conversations with anyone who's like, Ebon and I entirely disagree with everything that you say, or I disagree with what you say, but, and all this other stuff. Well, they go, okay. All governments, okay, that's they may lie, but they didn't lie about NASA and going to the moon or whatever, or they didn't lie about something else. They've got to tell the truth a couple of times, maybe. But I just find it funny that whenever you really start asking questions to people about what they think of something, someone, whatever, and they go, well, I don't trust that person. I don't think that's right. And then you go, well, what if I just gave you the link? It's going to a .gov site. Do you think the government is lying to you about that or something, or are they telling the truth? Or do you think this university, Harvard .edu or whatever, Stanford.edu, that they're lying to the public, or they're just not really smart? The university's wrong. Whatever stance that you have, it's easy to point out because they've got their story, their agenda, their narrative, whatever it is, and it's there out in the public. And the public looks at it and they go, okay, so that's what it is. And then so we have people who look into it and go, hey, let's look into this. All right, just look into it. Now, are you saying it's a conspiracy theory, or do you think it's true? You go, well, it's a conspiracy theory. Obviously, it's not true. And then you go, here's this link. It's going to something that you probably believe, whether it's a government agency, whether it's some educational system, whether it's some scientific forum, or some form of authority that you trust in, believe in, and they go, hey, they're saying that this is this, and so they're pretty much doing or saying exactly what the conspiracy theory says is going on. But of course, when they get asked about it or they're confronted with it, they just lie. So what is it? Are they lying the time that they're lying, or are they lying the time that you thought they were telling the truth? So which one is it? Hi, Dragon Tail Tarot. Man, haven't seen you in a while. My mind's all helter skelter. It's a weird term. Why'd I come up with that? Ariel is her real name. What is that? Is that right? Yeah, I think so. It's been such a long time. Court documents, yeah, whatever. There's just so many pieces of evidence. And all the associations are there that you can just link to it. And obviously, if someone was doing some type of research and there was absolutely no connection, you could say, look, there's no connection to it. And then that person could go, no, I do my due diligence. Here's my connection. Now you go ahead and double check it, make sure it's correct. And that's why I like to do these live streams and do everything live, so you can actually see me going to these websites and you can see all these things that are being said, and you can just back it up. And it's not like I'm going to like conspiracytheory.com. No, I'm going to like nasa.gov or whatever, right? And you have all these things that show up. Or even if it's not, you can actually link up to it. Like here's this book, Mars Perspective Energy and Material Resources. It's like, okay, you've got all these contributors here. How do we know that they're legitimate? And then you go, well, if NASA.gov seems to have them, and they have a thing called Plus Ultra Technologies Incorporated in Stony or in New York, if not Stony Brook, Shoreham, whatever. So things have been going okay. It's just kind of been sick, having legal issues and whatnot, but materially not good. Spiritually, if you want to say that, yeah, I think I've been doing pretty good. How are you doing? People can still come on in. So every show that I have, you can join. You could call in, you could click on the link, and you could join in, do a video conference. All right, so I'm gonna go over more occult stuff next video. NASA, interesting that I found. Lynn Rothschild is part of contributor for NASA, but you're not going to be so surprised because there's a whole list of famous people and infamous people who are part of the association of NASA and some parts, I guess, CIA and other agencies and things like that. And then if I go over all those things and you still believe in NASA, it's like, oh, that's just weird coincidences. How many weird coincidences does it take for you to start thinking, hey, something ain't right here? Anyways, I'll leave it at that. I think I may I'll try to do a video before I head out to Naples with my family and talk about the whole NASA connection with the occult, and then it's like, what do you guys think? Overall good. It's been an intense year so far. You gotta tell me about it. You still have my info. People don't know what the heck shoot, here we go. I talk about, yeah. All right, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed that. I would have never thought a researcher like Tracy Twyman would have really admitted towards kind of thinking that the model of the globe isn't quite correct. There's something missing, something not right. Goes into all the symbolism that's seen, and even looks into the United Nations logo, which is what a lot of flat earthers say is a flat earth map. So And yeah, I've done something very similar to what could be at the true North Pole, magnetic North Pole, and there's ones with Devin Elon Magi, and one with why am I forgetting names? Gosh, I can't remember. But what could be there? It's also got the same mythological stories that she presented. There being a huge tower-like mountain or something similar, and when you get there, you have to. There's the stories that you're confronted with, like some type of dragon, but it's not really. It's kind of, you have to conquer your fear, and you have to confront this dragon type of beast, and you pass, and you're able to get through, and you keep going, and you don't. The idea is you can't go there physically, so once you reach there, that's kind of it, right? So I always wonder about if they're hiding something like this. Have they been going back and forth, or has there just been a select few that have been able to make it and come back, or do they get there and they don't come back, or something like that? Like, there's so much to still further know, but we've gotten the idea right that somehow all these myths that we consider like fairy tales, they have some form of validity to it. The reason why is because it seems like every multi-billionaire power monger person who's like royalty, whatever, they always seem to believe in these. They join these organizations, secret societies, whatever. They mention certain key words in speeches or talks or interviews or writings, or they have some part of joint organization, joint venture, whatever, with something else that's related. And it just, why do they do that? It's not like they tend to join in like your typical, I don't know, Neighbors Baptist or whatever, evangelical church or whatever. No, it's something vastly different. And you've got to wonder, why? Anyways. Let's see. 13-year-old rabbit passed away the day after your birthday. 2 new bunnies. 13-year-old rabbit? I didn't know rabbits lived that long. Ever watched Dark Journalist at all? No, I haven't. Dark Journalist. Is that like a podcaster or YouTube or someone? I'll take a look. I have not yet hunted rabbits, just so you know. I've tried, but it's like every rabbit that I see, it's always in town where you can't hunt them. It's like, there's not a lot of meat you can get off of a rabbit unless it's pretty big, and the rabbits here don't get too big. It's like, I just feel like there's better things to eat than rabbit. I don't know. I just don't feel like. Aside from fish, like the idea of flesh, even like poultry, is just kind of like, I don't really. But again, it's more for, the kids to experience and know whether they want to eat it or not. And my daughter's like, things are too cute for her to eat, so I think that's also good, But it's weird because we find like rainbow trout beautiful, right? They've got this beautiful skin and whatnot, but they'll eat that. So, but I don't think they think they're cute, so they don't eat them. Anyways, I always go off on tangents. I am gonna continue to do some of the research so I can provide this video. It's kind of just giving you a story of things to look into and just provide another perspective. And eventually what ends up happening is I'll come across someone else's work and it's like, hey, this is weird. Why does mine link up to this? And that's very interesting. There's more coincidences here. What is all this stuff that's going on here? It's like I told my daughter yesterday. It's like, there's like 3 worlds: the one we're living in, and one we can't see, and one that we make for ourselves. I don't know why I said that, but I said that, and it seems to make sense. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and I'll see y'all later.